Good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday morning, and rather than just being here with Michael, I have the pleasure of being here with Michael and Howdie. This is episode number 8 of the Real Trilateral Commission. Laura, the time boss, is not here, so all probably form and structure is out the window, but I actually think in some ways that lends to where we're going today. It's going to be a little bit of a different kind of conversation. And I'm going to say hello to my friends before I tell you what it's going to be. Good morning, Michael. Good morning, Howdie. How are you? Or good evening, Howdie, actually.
Yeah, I got you. Oh, I thought Michael was going to jump in. Yeah, I'm okay. There's a lot going on, of course, on personal levels and world levels. So I'm just navigating it all right now.
Yep. Michael?
And it's a good morning for me because, Howdie, it's been so long since I've seen you, and it's always a pleasure, Emily. It's always a pleasure when we get together. But yes, this is very special. And I agree with you. Like, I miss not having Laura here.
Yeah.
But because so much has changed, and since particularly looking at it from the last time me and Howdie spoke, that yeah, like this should be different too. And we'll take away a little bit of that time structure and see how this naturally ebbs and flows. So I'm very excited for this conversation.
Absolutely. Well, Laura is in Montana at a craniosacral therapy course, and probably at this moment soaking in the hot springs that are available at her hotel, which is really what I need. My body hurts probably worse than it ever has as an adult. I've been busting my butt doing hard physical labor quite a bit lately, but a lot this last week. And so I'm my head feels okay, but the body feels exhausted. So I'm in a little bit of rare form. I was at ACL, Austin City Limits Festival, working this past weekend. And it was a fantastic experience of observation of the fact that, like, I don't understand how I'm the same species as all the rest, but here I am, and I'm excited to talk to you guys. And before we started recording, we decided to push record because Howdie had asked me, I stepped out for a minute, so I don't know what they were talking about, but Howdie asked me what I was going to do about PayPal. So we were talking about that. And then Michael, when we finished, said, what are you guys talking about?
and I'll say that, like, I used to be like the biggest, like, I love getting the news because I love the stories. Like, I love, and even deeper, like, how those stories like play into crafting life for the people who read the stories in the news. So for the first time, like, I've done news blackouts before, but like not really. I still I reduced the amount of information I was taking in, but that's become like down to like nothing. And sometimes there are these surprises. And so this would be one of the surprises, because you guys are talking all about PayPal. Like, well, what are you going to do? And I'm like, that's pretty much the only way which income comes to me. And apparently that's going to change. So I'm very excited for this real world, real time response to whatever's going on, which I have no clue.
So Howdie, as an equal aside to this, when I spoke with Michael last week about like the request for the slight shift in topics, he didn't know, he wasn't aware that World War III was a topic on the table either. So he really has been doing a much better job than either of us or almost anyone I know at like avoiding the dictated reality of the media and whatnot. So I'm going to explain to you about PayPal, Michael. So first of all, PayPal has been updating their policies and all that kind of stuff really, really frequently for the last definitely 2 years, but I've gotten more notices about that in the last 6 months. Like, it seems like almost every 2 weeks they're updating their terms and policies and whatnot. And sometimes it seems kind of innocuous and other times not. But in the last week, they put out in a statement, or there was something leaked, that the new terms of service that are going to go into effect shortly would be that they could delete anyone's account, terminate services to anybody who is in any way involved with spreading or promoting misinformation, and that
it wasn't removing the account. It was fining them $2,500.
Yeah, I was gonna get, well, And that they could keep up to $2,500 that might be in the account. I don't think they can assess a fine on you if you didn't have it there, but if you're getting paid that way, they can dock you $2,500 to recoup the expenses that they incurred in investigating whether or not you were a spreader of misinformation. Even if you didn't, even if the misinformation spreading was completely separate than anything that you were using PayPal for or anything like that, right? So apparently this was leaked and people did not respond well. There's been a huge movement to delete your PayPal account and all this kind of stuff. So now they're saying, oh, no, that was an accident. We really didn't say that. That isn't the language in there. But you and I both know that they were trial running it, right? To see if people would accept this or whatnot. But just in fact, I mean, they didn't deny that they had that conversation, right? Even though they denied that there was a mistake, that it got leaked or whatever, they didn't deny that that's something that they'd considered. And so just that idea alone is enough to be like, yeah, out of here. But that is the PayPal scenario and situation going on. Just a few weeks ago, there was a number of like human rights organizations and stuff, particularly in England, that had their accounts deleted for misinformation. And there's been some actions beginning, it seems, in the UK, but I don't know if these are real actions or just, cover up actions to start to try to control, put PayPal under, rules that they haven't been in terms of not being able to discriminate against who they serve. That seemed in the UK. I don't know if that's really real or not, but there's been nothing like that here. So this is the PayPal brouhaha. And of course, people in alternative media, right-wing media, human rights, or anything anti-war or anything like that, they're all now having this conversation about, leaving PayPal. So that's the update.
All right. Howdy, do you have any more to add before I respond?
Oh, she about summed it up.
All right. Is the timeline for misinformation, is it retroactive as well? Like something you've said in the past? Like
Yes.
Anything you've said ever?
Yes, there's
Am I
no.
understanding that correctly? That's friggin' nuts.
Well, I read the actual thing, and there wasn't like a time. It's all very vague. It was so vague that it all could be easily. You could take it 100 different ways because of how vague. But there were certain words that existed in these certain terms, but nothing like that for detail.
It's just like the YouTube thing where there's not any definite framework for you can say this, you can't say this. If you say this, this will happen. It's all very mealy-mouthed kind of things so that they can decide on a case-by-case basis and as their overlords tell them. Yeah.
Certainly. I mean, that makes perfect sense. Like, and then also what I find is interesting is the term which has been introduced over the last couple of years, which everyone likes to say nowadays, is it's gaslighting. Like, oh yeah, like we're going to leak this. No, we didn't say that. Like, so now it's in someone's mind. And so like, even if nothing happens, like, that's just like, so like manipulative, like and particularly it's not just delete accounts, but they can fine you. Like, that's like real, like there's no wiggle room, I would imagine, like when you hear that. But like, it obviously seems like they want everyone to go to a different platform. I mean, that's the most like concrete response is like, okay, like all the people who feel like this affects their lives, they're going to have to jump off this. So I'm curious, where's everyone being herded to?
So for most people, the obvious answer would be, oh, go to Venmo, but PayPal owns Venmo too.
Okay.
Right. And so like that isn't, while they are a slightly different service with slightly different terms and conditions, it's not really an answer. Stripe is quite a bit better. Stripe isn't perfect, but Stripe is like what a lot of people have on their own websites, to get paid, or like Locals uses it. So I use that for our locals and whatnot. It's basically like a way that you can just put your Stripe number into different kinds of platforms, payment systems, and get paid from Stripe to your bank account, right? It's a little bit different. They're much better. They're not perfect. The other thing I hear people talking about is, I forget the name of it, but Dan Bongino, who's involved in the creation of Rumble and Parler and all that kind of stuff. He has created, he has created, you know, something that I know people are beginning to use. I haven't had a chance to investigate that yet. I'm always suspicious of, of when someone who is very, very partisan comes and creates the solution to something that they say the other side's partisan, right? I'm always, I don't know. I don't like that stuff. So I wouldn't just jump on. I'd have to go really take a look and see about that. But I think, you know, the biggest thing is like getting everything as close to your own control as you can in terms of like not using centralized platforms. And then also like getting into some old school, like maybe it's time to start sending checks in the mail again, or, you know, things like that. But I don't think that there has become an obvious answer or solution yet. There's not like some new thing right now, apparently waiting in the wings that is obvious, either from a controlled or non-controlled standpoint. So I think it's just a conversation that's now being had, but there is a very, you know, the hashtag delete PayPal kind of movement going on.
So one of the things which I noticed, like, which came into my awareness. So just to take a step back, I'm putting much more emphasis in understanding and navigating reality just based upon what I'm seeing in my day-to-day life, regardless if that's given me like, you know, setting me up with like a blind spot because I have no idea what's going on unless it actually presents itself like in a real world way. So that's what I'm doing instead of the news or like taking in other information. I'm doubling down on the information which I am taking in. So that being said, earlier this summer, I became aware of, I know one of the platforms, I'm using the term platform in a general sense, was like Cash App. And then there was another, I can't remember the name of it, but my sister wanted to send me money that way. And I'd never heard of it before. And it struck me as being very similar to Cash App. And what I've noticed was both of those are very phone-based versus like PayPal is not a phone-based sort of mechanism of transferring funds. So I was thinking about that. I was thinking about that earlier this summer. I'm like, like, you know, they're making this so easy. Like at once upon a time, like this could never happen. And now like, you know, and I'm seeing primarily like, particularly with Cash App, like that's speaking to like to the younger generation, you know, like 20-year-olds and teenagers, like it's just easy. It's like, so I'm seeing that. And then what to me at least looks like on the other side of that same equation is that push towards like, okay, you can't do PayPal anymore. And the only people who are doing PayPal were people who are like maybe our age or our generation who we got embedded with PayPal when that was the first option for like easy electronic fund transferring outside your bank. So like this is really hitting at us. And then even more specifically, like us, anyone who has committed to something and then they've just gotten lazy with it. They're like, oh, this is how I'm going to do it, like self-included. And particularly those of us who are like, okay, we say things that could fall underneath that nebulous umbrella. So we're going to have to move off of, and we're looking at the solutions that are out there. And like, yes, Stripe's out there, but that's still like, that's a bumpy road compared to like how easy Cash App is. Like I've seen that. So that's just a general observation in terms of what I'm seeing on like level one, like manipulation of how people do their business. But then level two, what I'm interested in also is, you know, the synthesis of that antithesis being like, well, okay, well, do we go back to like checks in the mail? Do we find totally new? I don't know, because both of those like avenues, and probably they're more so other than just those two, are seemingly like what's going to have to be addressed in the coming future, in the coming days and weeks and so forth, because I don't want to be, at least for me, because I don't want to be fined $2,500 and have to ignore like whatever, like false legal documents they send me through email. So that's my thought on that.
Howdy, do you have any thoughts? I think I have an idea about what may be going on here.
It just feels more like a test to see how the people are going to respond to something like this. It's more to see, is it time to bring in the social credit system or
Right.
not? Are people ready for it? And I think it's kind of falls in that line as a test run.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think they were definitely taking the temperature on that, right? It was an intentional leak to take the temperature. But I think what Michael was saying is interesting. And when I look at the people I see promoting delete PayPal, right? And what I said about being suspicious of any like partisan attachment to these kinds of things. So if you've noticed when you go, like when I go to like parties or something like that, you can pay with Venmo or Cash App through a QR code at the door. That does not exist for PayPal. I have never seen a PayPal payment at parties. I've only seen Cash App and Venmo, or like a few places you see like maybe kind of Apple Pay or Android Pay or something like that, right? But if, you know, when I was just working at ACL, there's no cash on, everyone is paying through, you either have to use the app on your phone, kind of cashless pay, or you can get like a wristband charged up with your credit card and then go around and pay for stuff like that. If the main reason I would think that they would be wanting to get everybody used to paying on their phone, and they'll use the convenience and all of that, and also people's political outrage and like, well, I don't really like those, but I'm leaving PayPal, so I'm going to put that on my phone and blah, think I'm doing something and whatever. This now becomes a reason people will accept as to why they have to have a phone with them at all times. Because for me, the obvious answer to social credit scores or tracking through the phone is either to not use your phone or to not bring it with you when you're going places, or not put any of those apps on your phone. But if people think they're sticking it to the, people who only think so many steps ahead, they're sticking it to the man by deleting PayPal and moving to one of these other ones that will be permissive, at least for now, of the things that they want to say or do online. They'll put it on their phone, right? And they'll use it to start paying everything. And this will become the reason why they have to have their phone at all times. And when they say, okay, now we're going to a cashless society, maybe even if they didn't like it already, they already have it, they've gotten used to it, they're conditioned, and they're still sticking it to PayPal, or whatever, right? It becomes like a meaningful excuse as to why they allowed themselves to be snowed in another arena, right? And so this is really warming people up. I was listening to Dave Politis before we talked. For some reason, I clicked on his video. He was not talking about what he normally talks about. He was talking about government spying and surveillance, and he was talking about the fact that in China, a lot of people, and including people who go to visit China, are forced to keep an app on their phone that tracks them everywhere they go, right? And that's part of the social credit score system and all of that kind of thing. So this just seems like an intermediary, like a warm up, a conditioning for that kind of thing. Americans are never going to buy, you have to do this, we're making you. But Americans will certainly buy, oh, we're making your life so much easier. And in fact, well, even, you can win rewards and discounts and blah, blah, blah. And you could at these fucking festivals, they even have special VIP lounges for people who have certain apps on their phones or certain, right? Like they'll try anything to get. Americans love a fucking deal. They love free shit. They love convenience, right? It's a little different, the method you have to use to impose the same system in the United States than in China.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting overview, and probably that's going to be, Michael and you both said some really valuable pieces of information, sort of background, more things to think about. And yeah, we'll see where everything is in 3 or 4 weeks, I guess. Yep. Kind of like everything else. My feeling has been, it's one of the reasons I wanted my book out. Michael probably doesn't even know that. I have a new book out. It came out September the 1st. Yeah, I got that. I wanted to Exit the Cave, Ending the Reincarnation Trap.
Love it. Okay, keep going, please.
Yeah. So the reason I wanted to get that book out and worked so hard for 4 or 5 months for September 1st is I think that week of November 8, when the US elections are happening, is going to be one way or another very historical. Something one way or another around that time, and it doesn't necessarily need to be the United States. I mean, we've got so many world balls in the air right now, things that could explode. I just got the sense first couple of weeks of November, boy, we're going to get something heavy going down, and I wanted to get the book available long before that. So I was saying, well, we'll know more in 3 or 4 weeks how things go with this situation, but we're going to know in 3 or 4 weeks the situation with a lot of stuff, I think.
It's not a presidential election, is it?
No.
So, okay, like I'm not even thinking about that, but I'm like, okay, well, like I'm getting a recognition of how disconnected. What I think is
no, it's and I'm not an American, right? It's the governors and senators or something, right?
Yeah,
it's
the midterm election. So
it's the
right.
midterm.
Right.
So what I think is from my perspective, from my perspective is it's becoming like I framed it up a little bit, I suppose, as like, are you going to go this path or that path? But I mean, really, it's the only viable solution which people who have some degree of awareness like can take is to just completely walk away from it. Like the whole thing, like where it's all like collected or connected. So when I listen to the title of your book, you know, it's Escaping the Cave. And I think about a video, which to me was like very different than videos which I typically have put out on YouTube, which came out probably like
a year and a half ago. It was a year and a half ago. That one, the egg, that outside of the matrix, that one we saw very slow. Yeah.
So the same sort of like idea, like what you call a matrix, whether you call it cave, but that same sort of idea, like we're talking about the same sort of like impulse, which is like clear. It's like those two choices don't make sense. They only make sense if you're still connected to that system. And as soon as you realize like none of that can hold up, like you're like, well, of course, that's the obvious solution. We don't know what that looks like quite yet, but like that's the only way that's the only place we can go. To me, that's what I hear with this. And I've experienced that firsthand over the past 9 months of like my old life, like collapsing, and then what I'm putting in my mind, and then how life has been like, how I've been meeting with it. I'm like, okay, this feels like what that may look like. You know, I can speak to that in an experiential way.
So it's interesting what you said, Howdie, about, I hadn't really thought of it in quite that way until you said it, but this idea that the week of the election, something we're going to know something is going to happen. One of the things that we hear over and over, another catchphrase like delete PayPal. So another thing that's hashtagging is that there's going to be a red wave, right? That this is going to be, Joe Biden's moment of people, just offering their referendum on what he's done here, and that there's going to be a red wave, right? Well, I just also happen, sometimes I don't know why I click on the videos I click while I'm getting ready in the morning, because most of it is nonsense that I'm not interested in at all, but it always ends up informing the conversation I'm going to have. So I was listening to a conversation that David Martin and his friend James Purpura were having last week, where they were talking about that there's some weapon or technology that both Russia and China have that is this ability to deliver a tsunami that has nuclear waste in it. So it's like a nuke that creates a tsunami. So then it would be like Hurricane Sandy was in New York, but the water would all have nuclear waste in it. So, right, kind of thing. Well, that could be considered a red wave, because in Americans' mind, China and Russia are the red, the commies, the red or whatever. So everyone's like, rah, rah, red wave, we're going to take our government back. And the red wave, they're really getting people to add energy to by hashtagging it. And you know my theory on this stuff, Michael, when something is a code for a stock or crypto or hashtagged or whatever, it's getting people to add energy to an idea that has multiple layers, right? So everyone's bringing on the that's possible nuclear, they weren't making this connection on the show, but when I was hearing him talk about that, and then with what you just said, so something's going to happen. People think it's going to be election. Everyone's worried about like, oh, maybe there won't be an election. Maybe the Democrats are going to go all fascist and authoritarian and cancel the election and whatever, right? So that would be what they would be thinking. But the red wave could be completely about something else, right? And so, so I think maybe I think you're probably right that something is going to happen in that time period that will be very defining about like what's sort of coming next, right? And then what Michael was just saying, about your book, the title of your book, I remember that video. I remember listening to that video you made, Michael, when I was moving from Los Angeles to Austin. And when we were driving through that stretch between El Paso, after El Paso, where I had all those things about like the graffiti and the time travel and Jeff Bezos' 10,000-year clock. Remember that whole narrative, right? We were listening at that time to that video. So it's very ingrained in my mind when it was. But it's basically this idea, right? That there's like a reality and then there's something else. Like we're taught to think that this thing we live in is everything. But there's actually at least two. There's something here, and then there's what's outside of it. And we don't know if it's nesting dolls of many, 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 or if it is just like very simple, like on stage, off stage, kind of thing, like in a theater or whatever it is, right? And that, there's like, so you're in one, we've been in one most of our whole lives, the idea being maybe that we should leave it or be outside of it. And then there's there's this other idea, which is something I very much learned from Sonia Barrett, and goes to this book that I've been reading that is going to inform some of what we talk about today about Jon Rappoport. This is his book, The Secret Behind Secret Societies. It's a very little known book of his. It's quite excellent. The liberation of the planet in the 21st century. And so in a very different way than Sonia describes it, he basically describes the way like the cult or the created reality is like a circle, and people are moved inside that circle, and then they think that that is all that it is. But there's power outside of that circle, right? And if you can understand how to, not be moved into the circle, or at least be aware that movement into the circle is happening, you can sort of tap into unlimited amounts of power of creativity, and that this sort of keeps you from that cult-like mentality. Sonia sees it as what you're talking about as the cave or matrix reality for you, that is a game. And when we are inside of that, we're playing our character, but outside of that is our real self. And the game is not necessarily to be avoided as much as it is to be, you need to really develop a high level of consciousness about when you're in it and when you're not in it. And you have kind of like when you go to work, you behave differently than you do at home, right? You don't expect to like crack a beer and put your hand in your pants and, flip your shoes off at work. But when you go home, you do that. You're very well aware of what the separation is between the two. And, some people decide work is not for them. Other people decide home is not for them, and they become obsessed with work. But being able to sort of understand where the barrier is and how much movement between the two that you want to have. So I think it's kind of interesting. We're all sort of on different layers of this, but that's the basic idea behind Jon's book that he wrote, I think at about the same time that he created a lot of the exercises that I know Michael has done for many years. And so that's kind of that was sort of the topic for today's show, is we're going to talk about these ideas of Jon Rappaport's, me from the awareness of the book, Michael from the exercises, and Howdie, I think you're exploring the same thing with what you're doing with your book, and just kind of chat about this idea of where the line is. Is it something to completely be removed for, or is it about awareness? Then I have some thoughts to add about how we misinterpret what happens when someone does exit the cave, because I think people do. I think people exit the cave, they exit the matrix, and I think we don't recognize it when it happens. And this plays into our being tricked into wanting to stay inside the cave. So that's kind of my opening statement on this. Michael, why don't you go ahead, and then Howdie, and then we can kind of, move in some format like we usually do, but without the time boss.
All right, that was a really nice setup. Thank you, Emily. The couple just just responses, just like bullet point responses to what you said. I like the current language I like to use is like false reality, whether we call it matrix or what have you, and then recognizing two things. Like one, like false reality is just part, like that's not a good or a bad thing. That's anything which we have a story to. They're all false realities. And recognizing how that works. It only works by feeding it. And we feed it by like where we put our energy. So like being very aware of the nature of like going from one cave to another, but maybe the other false reality is larger, more real. But then also the recognition that it is kind of a game and you can choose how you interact. And so that's like a skill. It's like something that can be honed. That's a lot of that inner work and understanding consciousness. And then also practical stuff like we're talking about, like, well, what are you going to do with PayPal? That sort of thing. But ultimately, like what I find is most interesting about the conversation we're having right now is this sort of discussion can happen at any time with any human being, like on any timeline where they recognize like, oh, this is how it works. And it's not exactly what I thought. Because of what's happening on a global level right now, like the masses, there's a large number, there's a critical mass of people whose hands are being forced. Like this type of PayPal type discussion is saying like, we're all going to have to make a decision right now. And are you going to continue to feed the thing which we're talking about? Or is now like when we all like collectively like hold hands and jump off that cliff and be like, all right, we're going to figure out what this looks like. That's how I'm meeting all of this. And I find that very exciting. So that's what I got to say.
Howdie, any thoughts on what we just said? And then I'll come back and I'll start with my segment.
Yeah, it's the challenge of it's how big you might say the cave is, how big the reality is. Too many people treat it like it's the material world. But as I tried to say really early on, it's the material, it's the etheric, it's the astral, it's the whatever realm you can think of where you can still have some sort of me personalized consciousness involved in it is all still part of the deceptive cave, part of that circle you're talking about. So outside of that circle is even that, never mind attempting to do it, even for people to contemplate how far we're talking about, you might say, from leaving all the various realities, that's enough of a challenge for some people to even start grasping how many layers we're talking about as being part of the cave.
Okay, so the simplistic version that everyone has been offered by things like the Matrix or idea of like we live in a simulation is just there's the fake one and there's the real one and there's just two and the difference is stark and obvious and whatnot. And what you're describing is much more layered, like Russian nesting dolls, or like the theory that that's actually what the planets are, is that they're like concentric circles of energy, right? That are layered like right up on top of each other or right outside of each other. So yes, there's a lot of people who would think that like, oh, like I'm outside of the system or I'm outside of my body, therefore I'm outside of the cave. And you're talking about the many, many more layers, the many more red velvet ropes that exist between various layers. So definitely. Okay, so
I just got to say one thing before we move on. And because I want to link together what me and Howdie are saying, because they're immensely, they dovetail. And when I talk false reality, it's the same thing which you're talking about, Howdie. As soon as you have a story, like, well, it's not like as etheric as it may be, like as soon as you picture in the mind, like, okay, this is what it is, like that's another false reality. And the only thing that's not a false reality is when there's no story. Like I just am, like I'm right here. And then how do you tie that back into like, but I am living in a false reality. I am living in a body. I do have like these things. And like, how does this come into actual, like, I'm not just an idea in the fact I do have a body. I feel it if it's pinched. How do we play that game? And that game on a certain level is changing. So we're all like upping our skills. And that's what I think we're talking about, the same thing. All of these different ways of learning how to navigate the fact that it's changed or is changing collectively right now. That one of those nesting dolls, like that's all that's changing.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So the way you described it is very similar to, I was trying to see if I could find the exact page where he did it really perfectly, but I think I can just describe it from memory. So what Jon Rappoport explains is happening like to the culture at large, but in all kinds of individual situations as well, is that people who are quote unquote creators of reality or whatnot, they have a circle that they want to move as many people as possible into. You can think of that circle as like a painting, right? And the painting becomes like a universe with all sorts of definition and things that to populate it, to make it like very, very interesting, right? And people will become aware at a certain point that they are inside of something, but they think it is the reality. They think that is the universe. They're aware that they didn't create it, but that it's all encompassing and maybe even all that is. And then if you're a questioner of reality or a conspiracy theorist or just a highly aware one or whatever it is, at a certain point, you will become suspicious that that there is some part of it that is being created or that is not, you know, that is orchestrated in a certain way, and you will begin to look for the symbolism. You will run around chasing the symbol of whoever is orchestrating things, which you may or may not see as like that they have created an entire reality or universe for you, right? And so you'll begin like recognizing the symbolism everywhere, which is actually, they're fine with that. The person who created the painting or the universe that they want you to inhabit wants you to think you're very, very smart because you have recognized the signature or the hidden hand and their symbolism everywhere, right? And you become so sort of enmeshed in that, right, that you never actually get to the next question, which is, you know, is this all that there is? If this is not all that there is, why am I inside of here? Whoever created this thing that I'm inside of, like, how are they doing it? Right? Or, you know, what, you know, can I do it too? Can I step outside of it? All of these questions, right? And so obviously the secret behind secret societies, we're very obsessed with as a sort of subculture within the larger reality of like looking for like the symbolism of the Knights Templars or the Masons or whoever it is that is the whatever du jour, and just thinking that being aware of their symbolism, right, is like the most important thing, that we're going to learn their tricks and their tools, and learning their tricks and their tools somehow is like, that's the end point of it, right? And we see that a lot, like, you know, and I had, you know, I've been coming to this obviously myself for the last several years before I read this book, but the way he described it is, if you can paint a picture well enough that there's enough definition for people to be sort of interested in it and exploring it and investigating it and all of that kind of stuff, it will keep them busy, so busy for so long, and they'll be so, you know, it's impossible to believe that there's something other than that, because it would mean that, you know, your whole life was meaningless or you've been fooled all this time. And if they start to question, it's just like, oh, I'm smart because I know it's the Masons who are doing this and there's their sign. So see, I'm right. And there's not ever the conversation about like, what is the, like, what is the actual like technology? And when I say technology, I'm using Sonia's definition, which is knowledge of art, what is the knowledge of art that was used to create this reality that I am now a part of? And if they can do it, why can't I? Right? Kind of thing. Never gets to that. It never gets to that. We spend so much time describing the painting that we are living in and what everything means. And we never actually get to like what the function is of all of this. And can I create my own reality, you know, or whatnot? That's just the idea. Move people in. Let there be like a layered system inside of people who know more about the painting that they live in. And this goes back to one of our things about Bob Ross or whatever, right? Like creating this reality that so many people inhabited, and then have stratifications within there, people who understand the painting better than others and who are very good at describing the painting and why the painting may be real or fake or whatever. But the conversation ultimately is always about the painting, right? And right now we're going through whatever the fuck this is with the Ukraine, the Taiwan, My friend Les Luthor, early on in the Ukraine thing, like he basically went there, saw what was going on. He's like, this is illusion warfare. They're creating a painting and they're providing details that are very tug at the heartstring kind of details. And if people believe that we are at war with Russia, that we are in World War III, if we describe it well enough, then we can either follow through on it and do it, or we don't even have to, and people will think we are. And so, you know, we're kind of in this place where, you know, it's a false reality appearing real. Is it real reality appearing false? But it's all predicated on exactly the technique that he describes here of creating an immense amount of definition, detail, and symbolism within a system that is designed to keep people analyzing it in perpetuity. End of statement. Michael?
You had a lot of good things I want to respond to, but I'll just pick one or two. To me, the exercise, like using the analogy of like, you know, how realities are created with painting, and like people don't ask the second question, or a lot of people get stuck in like that first layer and don't continue through with like, what's the logical second question and so forth. To me, like it all points to like not an ultimate end conclusion as to like solving a mystery, as much as it points to that's just the nature of this realm. Like the realities, you paint the pictures and this is how it's done. And like, once you see that, well, then like, you know, the responsibility that comes into painting your own picture and like learning how the skill of doing that, like that's a real thing. And so it is the process of going, to me, like, you know, the internalized story, which I choose to believe, describing what you're saying is like, yeah, like that's put out there. The secret of secret societies is so that you can see firsthand how the system works, how the realm works. And like that, and it's ultimately just like, it's fun. It's a game. So like, I bring that to this conversation, like, you know, that's my perspective. And then secondly, I just want to add, and I'm excited, is like when about who and what Jon Rappoport may be. Like, you know, if you look at his history of like the work he's put out, like, you know, the AIDS research and like Revelation like 30 years ago, which then made it so clear to understand how the COVID thing was rolled out. Like, he is so far ahead in terms of like idea in this kind of subgenre which we find ourselves in, so that we can look at that. And in the latter part of our conversation, where I talk about some of his exercises, it is because like he's demonstrated like with his ability to express the realm, like, you know, this is his technique. This is how he painted the picture. And so that's why I'm excited to show those exercises, because, you know, right now we're all collectively at a place where like everyone has to go, you're going to have to start painting your own picture in a way you've never done before. Otherwise, you're going to go down this silly path, which they've laid out for you.
Yeah, if I would go with from what I got from when Emily gave her summary, it's two D words that to me really sum up what's going on with how we deal with reality. One, yes, is distraction. A lot of reality, as we've come to know, as our perception has come to know, because of course we're not dealing with a reality, we're dealing with a perception of something, we're dealing with a perception of energy. And so we're trusting our perceptions to be correct. And a lot of that is all designed as a distraction. It's designed to, yeah, keep you focused on the dream. And it doesn't matter how or why you're focused on it, it just keep you focused on it. It's one of the great challenges of anyone who's researching anything is there's value in research, right? There's value in, doesn't matter. I want to study science. I want to study history. I want to study religion. I want to study whatever. And you kind of need to do that to break through your false layers, to break through the barriers that you have. But even that will become a distraction because a person will reach what they needed to find and they won't stop and move to another discipline. They will keep going. Like if they think, if I keep going in the discipline more and more and more, I'm going to figure it out, as opposed to you only need to go far enough to know what you need to figure out and then go look for something else, go look for another area. So even that is set up as a distraction where it's like almost the person gets to a certain point where this is a good time to say, I know I figured out what I need to figure out. And it's almost like the dream gives you all of a sudden here's a bunch of extra stuff to focus on. And it's like another trick. And that's the second D word. The second D word would be deception. That again, we are, there's so many layers of deception that we are under, so many tricks that are being played on us constantly, and not just in the material realm. This was before we were born, in the pre-birth realm, the after-death realm. It's like we are under a series of bizarre tricks and deceptions that we don't even know are happening. And that's also another thing to really have difficulty going through, is not just the distraction, but seeing, well, what is here actually purposefully fooling me.
Can I ask a clarification question?
Yeah.
So you use the phrase "figure it out." What's the it you're trying to figure out?
I guess you're figuring out whatever you had held as unknown, and you're getting an answer of false or true. Is this false or is this true? Most everything you look into will be false. So there'll be very few times you'll hit true. So it's like once you've, like, say, I'll use history as an example because that's, my field. So once I got to the point where I realized, hey, all of history is a lie. It doesn't matter where I'm going to look. It's a lie. It's kind of like, okay, that's it. I've reached a point of like, there's the total knowing. Anything beyond that is just details. But before you get to that point, when you still don't know that, when you still think, well, I don't know, this might be true, that might be false, I'm not really sure, then you're still in the question mark phase. And the need to continue, if you want, the need to continue to answer that question is important. But that's to me, once you can look into something and say 100% I know that's false, that's it, you're done.
So for what purpose, like, so going through this, I think it's very valuable. But like, I'm curious, what is the purpose? Like, why go through all of it? Like, where are we trying to like end up by asking these questions and being able to sift through the false and true?
If I was answering that, my answer would be to go home.
And then what's home? And I'm curious, like, I'm trying to like,
yeah, exactly. Right. It's all we can know, I think, is it's not this. This is not home. This is a place we have been tricked into entering and tricked into staying. And so until we get a good enough strength to say, kind of like Maeve and Dolores in Westworld, when they finally get, when they get through all of their memory wipes and they finally can start seeing what you might say their past lives, which is their current incarnations into the Westworld, and they kind of see how many times they've been raped, how many times they've been killed, how many times they've been treated poorly. And they say, okay, that's what this realm is. I'm done with it. I'm leaving. And that to me is, and where are you going to? You're going home. Even though you don't really know what that is, there's an inner sense of there is something that's home, And that's where I'm going towards.
So I don't think you can answer this like concretely, but I'm curious what your opinion is. Are you describing a physical place? Like I'm leaving this physical realm? Or are you describing like a consciousness, the way I perceive this realm? Like how would you get to home? Or
By dropping everything that's not it.
are you still alive in your physical body?
No.
Okay.
No, of course not. Your physical body is false.
Right. So then
Awareness is
get
false.
to home
Consciousness
while
is false.
still being
Memories are
alive?
false. Thoughts are false. Ideas are false. All of it's false. So it's the one thing that's not false would be essence. So
So
in
is
my
there a
terms, when you
purpose
reach
for being
essence,
alive? Like in the body, like if we want to get home, but we can't get home when we're in our physical bodies, or
you're asking my opinion again?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like we're discovering this. I don't know. Like
You're there to be a power source to keep this entire insane system running. That's it.
so would global suicide make sense to stop the system?
No.
Okay.
Because the energy would still be getting drained in the astral. All that would happen is all of the souls would move into the astral realm, and then they'd be getting drained and energized and resucked out there, deceived at that point, and be put back into whether it's this realm or another realm or whatever else. No. So
Okay.
the real, to me anyway, and this is kind of really trying to clarify things that I've written in
Right.
the book, is this idea of you're using all the time you have available to tear through every deception, every lie that's been put upon us, so that whether it's when you're alive or when you're dead, if that deception is attempted on you again, that won't work. That you are deception free at that point, and therefore you're standing in your own power, you're standing in your own sovereignty, you're standing in your own everything, and therefore nothing can hold you back. Because that's really what I think it is. It's like you might say there's a thing that's holding us back, and we agree to allow that force to hold us back. And so by knowing everything about it and how it works and how it tricks us, so we can no longer be deceived, there's no way it can hold us anymore. It's almost like the gate at the amusement park will open to us, and off we go. It can't stop us anymore. But it's really about finding, I think, truly our own power, but that power is not here. Our power is everywhere. It's everything. It's totality. And so, like you say, you can't talk about it, but you can feel it.
Okay, so I have a bunch of responses to the things that you both said, and just what you just ended with there, I think, is exactly what Jon is talking about. He talks about there being a power outside the matrix or many matrices or whatever, right, that can be tapped into and can be the source of creativity. And I think maybe his thing about it, though, is that it's not someplace that you go to escape this. Once you become aware of it, then being in a body and having your own perspective and all this kind of stuff is an enjoyable practice. And you know where the well of true inspiration is. And then you can come in and you can do different things with it at the different layers. So this is going to get a little weird here, but it's tapping into things that Michael and I talked about in our early days working together. So we have played around with the idea that Jon Rappoport is actually Rudolf Steiner. If you look at them, there's a tremendous resemblance between them, okay? And Rudolf Steiner talked about these various layers of reality and what would happen over the course of time and whatnot. Jon Rappoport plays a number of characters. Like some people think he's a health reporter who talks about HIV and now COVID. Other people think he's an artist, right? Other people think he has these, this great understanding of secret societies and the layers of reality and how to, metaphysically master all of the layers of the realm, right? It is very clear to me, if you read his blogs or his various blogs or Substacks, that he has certain characters he steps into when he's talking about certain things. And sometimes it's difficult to understand which one is actually him. And the truth is that they're all him. They're fractals of him. Like the Jon Rapp, the whoever he is, the consciousness, the creative source exists outside of time and all the layers. and he plays this role at this layer of reality, and this role at this layer of reality, and this role. And sometimes the most fascinating, and some people think they're annoying, and I do too, but sometimes it's fascinating to watch him like stage these conversations between the various versions of himself at different layers of reality. Like he'll kind of role play within the role play and ask silly questions and give silly kind of answers. And when you look at the totality of what he's doing, it begins to make sense, even though like if you just stepped into that and didn't know what he was doing, you're like, huh? Right. But so I think that there is, I think that's where a lot of this debate is that like when you find the exit, is it disappear and go off into that? Or is it go, oh, I see, like this is who I really am, but there's like no place to play or experiment or learn or develop certain things out here. So we go in here to do this and developing an ever increasing set of the skills that you're talking about deception, but also about how to play within each game. It's kind of like the difference between playing soccer or tennis or whatever, like understand where you are and what the sort of parameters are there. And is this a place I can express myself or not? Like he doesn't do everything. He does a lot of stuff, but he's figured out places where he can go and express using different forms of creativity and characters and whatever, these massive ideas in a way that helps him better understand them and helps other people begin to understand them. And I think what you were talking about, Howdie, with, people researching a topic and then just continuing to research and becoming very, very specialized and looking and looking and looking, this gets to the core of the glass bead game, which has been the source of inspiration for Michael for a lot of stuff. This was about creating people, or creating students, or there being people that were like highly skilled generalists who understood how to dance in many topics and many cultures and weave them into a painting that could describe something and make sense. But instead of staying in that painting, when they were done with that one, they moved on and they described something else. They were the glass bead players, right? They were legendary, and everyone else was a specialist, right? Like a doctor was not the most talented person. The doctor was only good at one specific thing and continuing to research that, right? So this idea of having highly skilled generalists who know how to dance to many different kinds of music and who know how to express an idea in many different languages or cultures, I think is, again, the similar type thing as what I just described with Jon Rappoport, right? Understanding where you are and what tools you're working with and what is the best way to lay down an idea here so it can have maximum impact and then move on. You talked about Westworld. Have you still only watched season 1, or have you watched all the seasons now?
Still only fully season 1.
Okay. So I want you to have your own experience. So I'm not going to go too far into details, right? Yeah. But the first layer of recognition is that they're reliving the same day over and over and over again, right? And they begin to bust out of that. Then there's the realization that they're in a park. Then they think that, okay, we're in the park, and then there's the world out there. But then they realize that outside of the park, there's just another park. There's several different versions of Westworld that all have a different theme, right? And they figure out that there's like 3 of them or 4 of them. And then they're out, and what they think of is the greater world. And then they realize that their consciousnesses, programmed or real, are being used to create the people and the personalities that are in this thing that they think was the real world. So then it's about, how do we get out? It's like that, the never ending sort of nesting of dolls. And to this point, we've seen this weird, like, what looks like an AI, like there's this fissure that some of them are going to that looks like a holographic reality. And I don't think we're at the place yet where we know if this is like an AI prison or construct, or if that is the greater space that you're talking about, right? So that layered dolls thing, like that Westworld is showing all of that. And you'll see as you go on in this, that, oh my God, there's multiple parks, and then is the whole world outside of that like a bigger park? And, you know, we don't know the end point of that. But I want to say, you know, what you were talking about learning every deception so that it can't be used on us or trick us again and whatnot. I think we've all become very good at that, right? Like, you know, I know how long I've been doing this. I think Michael's been doing it about the same amount of time as me in terms of looking into reality and all this kind of stuff. And I'm assuming you've done it at least as long or longer. And we know a lot of stuff, right? But I sometimes observe other people, and then I have to make the admission about myself that I've been guilty of this as well, is that we've learned all of these tricks. But we're all just still sitting around here talking about them. Like, I see a lot of people in our community who are like, you know, further like complaining about the state of reality, feel victimized, not empowered, like, you know, are constantly not taking responsibility for like my choices or their choices or what I'm doing or what not. Instead are really, really busy figuring out who all the villains are and what the tricks are that they're using so they won't be tricked about them. But the truth is like the main contributor to the position that they find themselves in that they don't like is the lack of taking responsibility for your own decisions, your own choices. And then I don't know what the skill is, but when you discover the deception, right, making a choice that like sometimes it's harder and requires you to take on more responsibility instead of just looking for the next deception and the next deception without making any changes. We've all become very good at uncovering all the deceptions, but like a lot of people haven't done, and myself included, something I'm actively working on now. It's become the topic of what Michael and I have been doing, is like measuring all of our synchromistic discoveries against like what is happening inside, how am I growing, how am I changing, what am I taking responsibility for? So I think that deception uncovering means nothing if there's not an action taken because of it to change how you do things, right? So that was kind of my response to all the things that both of you guys said. And on we go with the next with the next round, I think. Michael, or if either of you have a response, go ahead.
So I'll pick one thing to respond to. So to me, like I'll always go back, or you know, how I approach this dance is like there's nothing more real than the false reality of being in a body and being alive, and I'm here. So like this is where I'm supposed to have fun, or supposed to be doing my stuff, as opposed to like something which my consciousness is not. This is all I really know, or at least right now. So because of that, like I've really doubled down into looking at the most literal experiences I'm having, because my life has changed so much. And so all that's a setup for this. So I've got two sons who are in high school right now, and they go to a Catholic school, and they both play soccer on the soccer team. And I go to, you know, I support my sons. It's a very important part of my life. But the idea of like high school sports and like in this like really like close-knit Catholic high school, which I'm not really a part of, like that's never really appealed to me. And there's a lot of fandom associated with it, and fandom within athletic pursuits has never appealed to me. Like I love athletic pursuits, but like to lose oneself in like what it means to be like root for your team. So all that being said, like and I won't go into the details of like how I got there, but in the last like 5 games, like this shift happened inside of me where like I'm part of something, not really part of it, but more so than I've ever have been in my life. Like I'm part of the fan group of like these other parents who like bring something which has never been me in my experience, in the way like, you know, I would go and like value or judge culture at this, you know, in this time in history. So what I'm trying to say with all of this is like this shift happened. I'm back into like the most false realities, which like started pushing me away. And I'm having so much fun with it. Like, I don't take it seriously, but I'm finding something which at one point in my life, like I had like an internal eye roll, whereas like now I'm looking forward to it. Like, I understand the like shortness of this time in my life with my boys. I'm appreciating like just like this interesting aspect to people who I probably would never be part of their lives. And I'm just having so much fun with it. So to me, like all of this discussion in what we're talking about comes back to the real, like mundane, like reality of like, this is my life. And like the whole world's collapsing and I'm having so much friggin' fun with it. And I can't imagine anything being more true than that. And like, however that impacts the greater truth, which I can't quite understand. I think it's beyond understanding, but I can recognize, or at least pay honor to that it exists. Like, you know, that's how I'm kind of meeting this. And that's what I think like Jon Rappoport and his approach and him being the deceptor by having different roles. Like that's how I like to meet what we're discussing. Howdy.
I'm good. We can move on to the next segment, I guess.
So there's one more thing that I wanted to say, I think, about this entirety of this idea and this idea of leaving it and what happens. And I want to throw an idea out there and we can talk about it. And then maybe we can move to the portion where Michael tells us about the exercises and whatnot, because I've never done that kind of thing. Okay. So one of the things that we do in this community, and we can think of a few examples depending what kind of alternative information you're into, whether you are a person who was like really into the reality of like the internet and the computer and freeing information, like, you know, your Julian Assange, this kind of stuff. And you look at like what happened to him, or like Aaron Swartz. Do you guys know who Aaron Swartz is? Okay, Aaron Swartz is like, he was like a young tech whiz kid. He was one of the original creators of Reddit. And like, so that you can also an RSS feed, like he created that concept, but he got in trouble for trying to free the information that taxpayers pay for, but is stored on these drives at like Harvard and MIT, and you have to pay to access it. He downloaded that whole database and was going to free it. He got caught. And then he was being prosecuted and harassed, and supposedly he killed himself, but it was one of those questionable kinds of things. Or you have your Gary Webbs or whatever with the, you know, the Dark Alliance kind of thing. So we have people who are into that reality, who either end up in a torturesome situation or they end up, quote unquote, dead, right? And then we get afraid of that. In our reality, of course, we have the scenario with Tracy Twyman, and she was dealing with more occult information, right? But there's, you know, a lot of unclarity about that, and a lot of myths and a lot of stories and a lot of truth. You know, we don't know. We don't know. But it's entirely possible that like once somebody finds what appears to be an exit, the rule is you have to drop your body, right? And then we all go around saying, oh, this person got too close to the thing and this happened to them, or whatever it is kind of thing. And so we all talk about wanting this exit, and like, we don't know that these people didn't just find the exit. And if you find the exit and you didn't leave a note belong, which is, I don't think what happens, because I think when you find the exit, sometimes it's not even clear until it's happening that that's what it is. And there's all this stuff that happens inside the system around that exit, that we're not really considering, right? We're not really considering that, like, how much of is it possible that this is what exiting the cave or the matrix or the like looks like? And I think some nuanced and intellectual and inspired conversation around that might be due at some point. And then you have someone like Jon, who's maybe figured out that, oh, the point isn't to like exit, because if you exit, then that's what happens. You drop the body and you might be out there floating around doing all this other stuff. But like, actually, there's enjoyable things about the body and about the different layers of the realities and whatnot. And the greater work, or maybe it's not greater, I'm not trying to make a judgment, is to really understand where you are, who you are, where you are, what the operating rules are, and what you can do in each thing. And then you can enjoy all of these different sort of layers and levels. And I think there's I'm open to the idea that there's a certain sort of eternal, like you can become eternal, or when I say immortal, I don't mean like in a vampire way or whatever. We're talking about extreme life extension with somebody who has achieved this level, and it's a conscious choice. It's not a reactivity of like, this thing is happening to me and da 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 da. Like, he is in the driver's seat about his engagement with the various levels of reality. And it's like a different way to handle those same sets of options, right? I think I had something else to say, but I lost my train of thought. And so I think that that's, you know, I don't know if the point is to leave, right? Maybe it is, and maybe for some people it is. And so then we have to understand maybe what the different ways leaving could look like. Or there's the option of just this ever expanding level of awareness and decision about where and how to engage and why, right? You know, for your own self. I too, in the last several months, have been engaging in some more normie kinds of activities that I left behind a long time ago when I went on my search to find all the symbols and discover all the deceptions and all of that kind of stuff. And I'm glad I know all those things. I have no regrets about that. But there is something that is very real about just enjoying an activity with other people in this realm, knowing what it is you're doing, knowing that that is not the truth. It is just a part of one layer of the experience. And like, you know, when it's over, especially, you know, going back to whatever the next layer or thing that you're understanding or doing is. And I think we've been tricked into not enjoying a lot of these pleasures of being alive, right? Because like, oh, it's a sign that you're asleep or you're da 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 da. Like, I think asleep is just like, are you aware of where you're at, what you're doing, and what the sort of structure of this place is? And are you aware that there's some other things than that, right? And just having that sense of, I guess it's a sort of kinesthetic awareness and an intellectual understanding of what that means. And I think I'll stop right now because I think I'm losing my train, but there we go.
Howdy, we haven't heard much from you lately.
Okay, I can only speak for myself, of course. Everybody needs to focus their own experience and their own research and their own everything. My answer now would be, this is a suffering pit of hell. It's always been a suffering pit of hell. It will never be anything different. That's this realm, the etheric realm, the astral realm, the angel realm, the whatever realm. And I'm done with it. And I will never return to any of this bullshit again. And that's it. That's it. I'm doing my thing to be of value and of service before I go.
Mhm.
But I'm no longer here for anything in this giant, sucking, destructive thing ever again. Second point would be what Emily was talking about. It made me think of, I think often about what is spontaneous human combustion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That somebody has reached a certain point where they have literally not only jumped the frequency that they can no longer stay in this realm anymore, and they literally just burn up and are gone. But the problem is, like I said, it's no good if you figure out all the deceptions of this realm, but you haven't figured out the deceptions in the after death realm, and you walk into there and treat whatever's going on like that's a real experience, or that's a new dream, and you just get tricked back into this. So there's so many levels, and I guess I've just got to the point where I'm just done with all of them.
Michael?
I'm trying to think about like the internal, like I'm feeling like I'm like, okay, like I totally get where Howdie's coming from, because like it certainly isn't always, it's not fun. It's difficult to be here. And so then like the internal idea of then when I leave here, it could be as deceptive, if not even more deceptive, with the consequence of having to get back on the vomit ride. Like that's that feels like a bind to me. And so it's maybe, so that's what I think is interesting, at least from me. Maybe it's just like me placating my simple mind, but like the Jon Rappoport exercises, at least what I think, this is where I want to go with this, is I was thinking about, we're not going to do these exercises, but what I think might be interesting is to describe them, and then we could talk about like what skill does this develop? And in light of like all of the things which we've already been talking about, can we do that? Does that make like a good next sense?
Sounds good. And I think for everybody to remind, because not only would I now be classified maybe like a Gnostic per se, I'm kind of, the people would see me as a heretic, but now I'm actually a heretic of the Gnostics. Like literally, I would be like on the fringe of the fringe. I'm like, I'm almost like a Cathar now, right? It's like something's hunting me down now, because I'm literally, there's no further fringe I can go. I've had, this is it. I've reached, there's no other limit. I'm it. So I'm just making sure you're all aware that's where I'm at. You don't have to join me. I'm just sharing my thesis and my information and my own personal experiences, but that's how in left field I am now.
Yeah, I think there's some people that have been here a lot of times, and right, you've been, and maybe you're on your last one. Like I had another friend who was done with it, and she expressed that to me a number of times, right? And this, whatever this is we're living in, this simulation or whatever, complied, and she ended up in one of these mysterious situations where all of us were left sad and going, what happened, who did this, what's going on, whatever kind of thing. But exactly what you said, she expressed to me in her own words, right? And almost exactly as you expressed it, right? So we shall see what it looks like. And I don't know, like when she was gone for like a while, like I felt like there was, I was able to connect and contact, and she shared a tremendous amount of very important information with me that has been the basis of a lot of the work I do. And then at a certain point, she's gone. Wherever she is, she's gone. So maybe she really did. I mean, I don't know the truth about what happened to her. The story is that she ended her own life. I see evidence for that. I see evidence for 2 or 3 other scenarios as well. Just like all these situations, Aaron Schwartz, Tracy Twyman, all of these kinds of people, there's like a couple of possible realities. Maybe that has to be the case for a person to make a clean exit, right? But she is not, I don't sense her here on earth as a new person. I don't sense her in any of those realms. For a while I did. She's gone. So maybe that's the way that goes. And so, all right, Michael, do you have anything you wanted to say to that, Howdie?
No, I'm good. I just thought I should share that. So
I love that. I love
total
the
respect for
fringe
that.
of the fringe. Like that's music to my ears. Like if someone whispers that in my ear, like I'll follow them anywhere. Like the fact that that's good. All right. Thank you. I like fringe. So let me go and give a little bit of context with my relationship with Jon Rappoport. So probably about 10 years ago, I was really like committed into devouring the information he put out. And I did not know of the book which Emily showed in the beginning.
Almost nobody does.
And she's absolutely right. Like I thought I found all of his stuff, and I'd never heard of that book before. So one of the things which I really liked about which I took from Jon Rappoport, was all of his imagination exercises. So he talks a lot about like, history and like deception and all of this. And then he comes back to like and I thought you did such a beautiful job of expressing it, because it helped me clarify my way of understanding what these things are. But it's really of being able to receive creative power outside of like living in the false reality. And right now I might ask, well, for what point? And it's so you can go and play and paint your own pictures in the false reality. Like, you're here, you might as well do something. And then I also, this came up in another conversation, a podcast I did earlier this week. And I was using the word creativity. And it was a paneled group. And what I realized after using the word creativity, everyone took that as a definition of meaning, like, well, I'm going to go and create a sculpture or create a painting, like that. Like, it's like creativity equals like mainstream artistic expression. And I clarified then, and I want to clarify this right now as well, at least to my understanding, how I'm using the word creativity, because that's what these are ultimately about. Creativity exercises is creativity is an approach which is very natural, which is probably, I would say, the most basic level of what it means to be a human being to be alive, have an aliveness connected to a body with ground beneath your feet and sky above your head, whatever the hell or wherever the hell we are. Like, what we do is we're creative beings, and like how we're creative can be highly manipulated, but that's what we do. We make stuff, like whether that's a physical thing or what have you. So these are exercises that really help develop that capability of what it means to be creative, in all of its many ways of this dance where we find ourselves in a body. So he had these exercises in one of his something I downloaded. I mean, it's been so long ago, but I remembered, no, it was definitely an auditory file, and I had to take notes. He's like, these are the exercises, and you do these 10 exercises every day, and you do each one for 15 minutes. I'm like, it was ridiculous. I'm like, no one's got that much time to do these sort of exercises, and they're draining. So I turned it into a game for myself. So what I did was I listened to all of his exercises. It wasn't written down. I had to write them down. And then I put each one on a card. Like, I made it fun. And what I would do at this particular time was like, I'm not going to go and commit to that amount of time of doing his exercises, but I will commit to doing one a day. And I probably did that maybe 60 days. Like, that's it. But that was good. I still have this thing which I made well over a year ago. So it started with an envelope. And so this begins with all I'm doing is I'm repeating Jon Rappoport sort of exercises, just so we could look more into Jon Rappoport sort of mentality, not necessarily to say it's the only way or even a good way for doing things. So on these exercises, one of the key lines is, projection is manifestation. So that's Jon Rappoport language. You take that any way you want. I put it right there. And then there's this. I think I just did that for myself. Smile, tomorrow will be even more amazing. We're not maybe I should write Hallmark cards with that attitude. So, okay. So then inside of these, I made these cards.
Look at you.
And I wrote down each of the exercises. And so we're going to go through these and maybe kind of poke holes in them and try to see and understand what they are. And you're going to begin to see themes. You're going to begin to see some interesting themes. But I am going to show you how I threw my random generator into the game. So it's how are you going to go and pick what card to go and do or what exercise? So what I would do is I made this grid on the back. For each one of these cards, there's a grid. And I would shuffle the cards and I would just lay them out 1 through 10. And I would write down the number. I would write down the number of the order. So that'd be this is 1, this is 2. And then what I would do is I would look at the history of the numbers that were within the card. And I would look for the strongest pattern. Like, is it a double? Is it a triple? Like anything like that. And then that would be my random generator from the universe of which card. And that was like it was just like the most fun way which I could go and meet this. Like, I'm not taking it any more serious than like, all right, this is Mike's nuts. This is Mike's fridge. So, all right. So this is one of his exercises right here. This is always a good one. So he wanted you to do this for 15 minutes a day, every day. So this first one right here is, this all it is. Imagine picking up a ball of fire and throw it to the horizon. So what's happening? Like what, like, so what are we, like, what visualization, what are you working with? What is happening in that exercise?
Oh, fire.
Like, so I'll throw some things out. Like, it's immensely empowering, right? It's like, I got this catapult. I'm going to throw this ball of fire at everything. Like, listening to Howdie talk about like the layers and like, with the, like, I'm picturing that. I'm like, I'm exploding layers. Like, am I doing that? I don't know. But what is the fire element? Like, where does that play in? Like, like this is the level of stuff, like what I thought about in terms of doing this sort of exercise. So picking up a ball. So any other thoughts on that one?
Well, I think it's interesting. It requires you, even within the exercise, even if it's only momentary, because you understand it's in your head, an exercise to overcome the fear of the hot flame, right? Like, okay, you know, so that's kind of an interesting, like, that's what I thought at first was like, oh, it's gonna be hot, right? And then there's the question of the horizon. Where is it? Is it, as Einstein says, it is an imaginary line in the distance that recedes as you approach it? How far do I have to throw? Do I need to be a good pitcher? Should I practice my throwing skills, right? Like, for me, all these questions start to come up, right? But these are all things that we have worked to overcome in our quests toward advancement anyway, right? People go firewalking. People decide they're going to get better at throwing something like that. People are exploring where the limits and the bounds of realities are. So I like the exercise. Like, it seems, I understand now why it's imagine it for 15 minutes. Right? Because there's all of these things that will come up, right? And then there's the actual throwing of the fireball at the horizon. I like it. And it would be interesting.
For me, when I got it, it was that what you're picking up is the sun. That you're actually picking up the sun. And so not only are you throwing it at the horizon, you are restarting the sun, you're recreating it each time you do it. And it also means then that the power you think comes from the sun comes from you.
Very good. Very good.
Wow. So like, that was fun for me. Like, as soon as you painted that picture in my mind of like, imagine being on that scale, like where I could go and pick up the sun, and like, you know, that certainly, like, that expanded like the pictures in my mind. I like how Howdie approached that.
Yeah, that was good, Howdie.
All right, here's the second one. So this has 4 steps in it. So the first thing you got to do is you have to draw yourself on a piece of paper, and then you draw a magnetic field around the picture of yourself on a piece of paper. And then, like, you're looking at this picture of yourself with the magnetic field around it, and then you just start imagining that the field is changing in size and color. All right. So you look at this 2-dimensional drawing of yourself with this changing of color and size of the field around it. You're just doing it within your mental sort of thing. And now what you do, now you're going to change things. And this kind of like this is indicative of how Howdie's intuitive instincts. Now you look to the sky, like in reality. Now you look at the sky where you're going to find the sun. And now you imagine a magnetic field in the sky changing in size and color. All right. And then you're supposed to go back and forth of looking from your body into the sky and seeing a magnetic field. Now looking at a drawing of yourself with a magnetic field, and you're blurring together this idea of whatever a magnetic field may be. And then you're playing with scale. That's what I thought was so interesting about what Howdie said with like, well, I just imagine picturing picking up the sun. Like this to me feels like scale like that again. Now I'm looking outside of my body. Now I'm looking down beneath it. So, and then the blending between like as above and so below in magnetic fields, that's what I took out of that exercise.
Emily, what do you got?
So it's coincidentally, I think I know why and the where of this exercise because of what I just read in the book this morning. Right.
All right. So can you add some of that?
Yeah. So he was talking with Jack True, who's a hypnotist that he did a lot of work with in developing these exercises. And Jack True was telling him about someone he'd worked with, someone he'd hypnotized, who he believed was truly an assassin for some government agency or whatnot. If I'm not confusing these, I was reading a couple stories, and that this guy believed that he had been given drugs at one point, but also exposed to some sort of electromagnetic radiation that gave him extra abilities for performance. So he'd be able to go for long periods of time without sleep and perform at a very high level. And that this also maintained a degree of youth, right? And the hypnotist went and read some sort of intelligence or military manual that did seem to imply that there was a technology that did this, but didn't go into details. So in my head right now, what I'm realizing is that Jon, hearing this and with his with the way he sees things, is going, oh, this is a cute trick. They have convinced this guy that he needs some sort of drug or device to create an electromagnetic radiation that gives him a lot of energy and power. Jon knows that this is actually a natural process that exists for people who develop their relationship with said sun or said thing in the sky or whatever, and that it's actually a creative process that anyone can do. But this assassin was under the impression that he was reliant on whatever technology or drugs were being used to create this for him. So Jon knows that this exists in the mind, and he's giving you skills to increase the power of your own energy body by being in touch with the power source of the larger universe that is a well of all power, creation, and inspiration. So that it's just, I was literally reading that right before we came on this morning.
Yeah, simple one for me was the sense of, because you're saying once you've got the, we'll call it the energy field that you're staring at in the picture you've drawn, and now you start looking for it in the sky, it's this feeling of, and again, obviously I haven't done the exercise, so I don't know what it would be like to do it, but the sense would be, would you feel like a shift of placement? So instead of being in the body, dealing with my own energy, the energy source here, like, you know, they might call it the etheric body, would I be potentially all of a sudden a greater being in a greater etheric body? Like, would I shift to this deeper version of myself that I don't usually know, with a different, like a different form, but still in this etheric body? That's what I got the sense of, that you might, by trying to do this back and forth motion, that you might jump into this second sort of place, second sort of form.
But what Howdie's saying, it made me think, because I was just describing that story from this morning. I practice this thing sometimes when I'm exercising, when I'm running and I don't have a lot of energy, right? Where like I ask all the other fractal Emilys if they can, you know, sort of contribute a little energy to help me. So it's like that same kind of thing. Like there's a larger version, or, you know, another power source behind all that is Emily, and that I can sort of tap into, and it can be a back and forth relationship. And it made me think of that when you were talking. So I like that.
So before I go into the next one, I just want to do one comment. You mentioned it's Jack True, correct? That's the name?
Jack True.
Jack True, because I you know, if you've read any of Rappaport's work, he, particularly as it relates to all the internal sort of processing, he credits Jack True as like the world's greatest hypnotist, and he was a good friend, and he got to interview him and all this sort of stuff. And like at the same time, like Jon Rappoport also expresses like, this is kind of how the mind works and this is how it can be tricked. And like, that's not a good thing or bad thing. It's just, this is how the mind works. So like, as I hear you say that, I'm like, was there ever really a Jack True? Or is that just a picture of someone for me to think that this comes from? And I know that I have to accept it because I've already accepted Jon Rappoport. But either way, like I like.
Well, it could be. I mean, it could be one of his characters.
Without a doubt. Exactly. Because he's like, he's a trickster with us. So, okay.
You never see him on video interviewing these people. It's always him writing out the script of the interviews, right?
And we're creating the picture in our mind.
Totally. Yeah.
All right. So here's the next one. This is another 5-stepper. All right. So this is, you begin by writing this down. This is a game I am playing. And then you draw a square. And then you, I mean, this is so good. Then you imagine a word or an image in the square of something desired. And then you mentally grab that word and then you project it to the horizon. And then you repeat that for 4 times. So what I find interesting about reading this is seeing how there is a integration with different types of like things that you're doing as the person doing the experiment. So first, you're writing something down. Like, so you've got everything that goes with like writing and thinking about words and putting it on a paper and what happens there. And then you draw a square, but then you don't write anything in the square. You're like mentally putting it in this square, and then you're grabbing it and throwing it. So there's all this sort of like mental gymnastics that needs to happen. And then we'll see this as we go a little bit deeper into these exercises, that desire nature and wanting nature is a big thing within these exercises. And I've thought a lot about that, because when I was doing these exercises, I was also holding another story in my mind of releasing a desire nature. And I'm like, okay, well, why do I want to do this? And like, what am I desiring? Am I desiring like a fancy sports car, something like that? Like that did not necessarily seem right. I don't know, but I know that me personally, when I was doing these exercises on the regular, like the desire nature of these exercises, I always found is a bit of a conflict. Like, why would I want to go and feed into that? I don't know if I necessarily still feel that today, like, or I would approach it in a different manner, but I wanted to add that into the discussion as I drop the card and allow you, Emily, to reflect back upon it.
So, yeah, I mean, I think it's probably just really to show you to as an exercise and demonstrate your ability to like project reality, to manifest certain things, right? Like it isn't, and it can be like, yes, you like the idea of a sports car and then being conflicted with that or whatever. But some of you could imagine that some of the desires could be something that was actually meaningful or beneficial. But I think it's just to understand how powerful the mind is. And once you focus on it, like it becomes the object of your focus inside the square, and then you take that and you project that out into the ever expansive reality of the horizon, that is a valid skill. We had this crazy thing happening this weekend where like we'd say something and it would manifest momentarily, right? Like there was these carts driving people around backstage at the festival, and Laura's like, we had been watching these all weekend. We're walking them and stop. And she's like, I wish one of those carts would pick me up. Boom. A guy's like, you girls want to ride? A few minutes later, like we were leaving the festival. There's these pedicabs outside. There's like thousands of pedicabs in Austin. And I'm like, I wonder if we're going to see Hadaza. That's one of Laura's friends who rides a pedicab. There's thousands of these. 1 second later, Hadaza's like, Laura, right? Like it was like momentary, the manifestation. So as soon as you focus on something and then sort of project that out by speaking it or visualizing this thing, that is actually the nature of reality creation. So it seems to me that was what he was trying to demonstrate, rather than, this ability to like manifest nonsense stuff or sports cars or whatever. Howdy.
Again, these are just my feelings of I'm just taking in what Michael, what comes to mind first when I hear the exercise. And in this case, I get the sense that it's not it's another one of these, not what you think it is. It's not this thing to find out how you manifest your desires. This one is about, because you're never writing it in the square, it's all about, it's your mental energy, and you're throwing the desire away. You're taking whatever the desire is, and it's being thrown away to the universe, and you don't have it anymore. It's because it's never becoming manifest. You never write it down. It's always in your head. And if you did this enough times, especially if you could do it with the same desire over and over again, at some point you might not even be able to manifest the desire in your mind. It would be gone. That would be my guess of what's there, like a sort of a very Buddhist kind of removal of desire technique.
So there's your solution to your problem about desiring.
There we go. It was written into the exercise. All right. Now we got another one. This is a simple one. Project for 5 minutes. So what you're projecting for 5 minutes is a statement. And the statement is, this feels like a game show. Like, I really feel like a game show host. I'm like, and the password is, I am immortal.
Oh.
I am
what? I am
immortal.
Immortal?
I am immortal. I am projecting that for 5 minutes.
That's interesting based on what I said a few minutes back when I was talking about that. Okay.
Well, I think it's interesting also with what Howdie's saying.
Just said,
and it's not, it just said project for 5 minutes, which is a little bit less. It's not as acute of a mental exercise of grabbing it and throwing it to the horizon. Mm-hmm. It's like more of something else. So what are your initial thoughts, Emily?
So this is funny because Sonia is very fixated on this idea, and I don't know if she's heard of Jon Rappoport, but I asked her if she's ever looked into this or done these exercises, and I didn't know he had said exactly that, so I'm going to tell her to go there. I think that it's a state of mind, right? And so it isn't so much about like how old your body is. It's about for how long and for how far out can you project this idea? And I guess this goes to what Howdie's saying also, is that once you exit all the layers and you're just home, you're there, maybe that is what he's talking about, right? So it's just kind of, I think it's very little to do with the body and much to do with your mind's capacity to hold that idea or that reality in that way for that length of time. You know what I mean? It's an interesting exercise. That's what I thought.
Howdie.
Yeah. So we got the I am immortal part. So that's like the mantra of the piece. So that's the mantra, but he's asking you to project it. So he's not asking you to hold it. He's not asking you to, he's asking you to, and he's not saying throw it. He's saying project it. But he's not saying project it where, project it how far, but he's just saying project it. And that's, I think, I can't say I figured this one out, but that's the word you have to understand. It's what does he mean by project? If you actually understand what he's meaning by project, it would make sense. But I haven't figured this one out.
Do you think maybe we're misunderstanding when they call everything projects and they're thinking of it as projecting something, right? Like, so we hear about like Project Bluebeam or Project We think it's like, oh, it's an operation. It's this thing that all these, resources and people have been assigned to, but maybe it's a projection. Maybe it's right. And this is right. We have this could be an area where we've been majorly like deceived and distracted. Right. And if we're dealing with projections as opposed to projects, then it's a completely different set of things going on than what we think. And the way you just were trying to sort that out made me think of that. So I think that's a good question you bring up.
Right.
Yeah, like what's actually on that? What's on that card exactly? What is the word that is used? Does it just say project? Okay, so we've taken it as project as in send out, but it could just as easily mean project, like Emily just said. It could be turn it into a more noun type word, project for 5 minutes, I am an immortal. You see what I mean? Like there's
Right.
something about the choice of the word.
Right.
It doesn't say project outward, project here. It's just this, it's a kind of ambiguous word that sit there with this mantra.
So I have to say this, like I've been known for shortcuts my whole life. So I may not have written it down, but for the nature of, like exactly as how he said, but like it doesn't matter for the nature of this exercise also is like, you know, it's we're part of this story. So I think this is the project and project. That sort of phonetic wordplay has never crossed my mind, and that's huge.
And think about this, right? We think of like the one I just happened, it just came to mind. It was the only one I could think of at the moment, but I said Project Bluebeam. Project Bluebeam is a project all about projections because they would be projecting in the sky that there are UFOs and aliens and whatever, right? So this is when we're talking about these things, I think this is something to really start to consider. Are we talking about a project or are we talking about projecting, right? A projection, and considering it from both those angles. So this was an interesting one. And if you did make a mistake,
and of course, projection can also mean a forecast for the future.
Yeah.
You know, I'm projecting an increase in sales next month. So you've got another possible word definition there.
I'm projecting.
Yep. So it's prediction. It's like, you know, projection, like this projecting the film out or screen out, and then project like everyone working on some little task to create this reality. So that was an interesting stumble into there.
So well, and all three of those, like if you want to look at the commonality of project and projection and all of these, it's dealing, and what we're talking about in the context of this game is it's very much dealing with like a setting a course or an expectation of what one wants to like have their future be, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, whether that's something you meaning to are doing. But like when you're watching the movie, a projector, and that's coming inside, you know, that's predictive programming. At least that's the theory of how that works. And this deciphering or breaking down these exercises and these words, to me at least, is very much like looking at how the realm works, like figuring out the skill in terms of recognizing how we're having these experiences. Did you have something else you want to say, Emily, before we go to the next one? I
just was looking up the etymology of the word project, just to see if there was anything we missed. And I think we did a pretty good job. It says here that, so it's throw forth, and jacere is to throw, to throw forth, to throw something forth. But then there's also something prominent, preliminary design, and tabulated statement. And then it said here, referred to in Latin as proiectus, having the prefix pro to reflect the idea of future going forward, and the participle yacere related to iactus, or to throw with roots. Thus, we can see the meaning of project in relation to the planning of a specific objective, observing that obstacles can arise even in the best laid plans that require adjustment, or the acceptance that it is not possible to advance with the original concept. I don't know. So I think we, in our sort of assessment of it, we hit on all the possible iterations of the word there. I just wanted to check it out. So that was what I was looking at. So go ahead. Next one.
Now this one, this is going to add a little bit of a wobble to our analysis. So the first thing is you create 4 symbols. So I like when I read this, like I remember first thinking, I'm like, am I supposed to create 4 symbols every single time this happens? But I didn't take it that way. I was like, I'm going to create 4 symbols for Mike. I think I spent like months deciding what my symbol was going to look like, and then what I was going to link to that symbol. And then it says, project each of those symbols throughout the universe for 5 to 10 minutes. So again, are you supposed to do each one of these symbols individually for 5 to 10 minutes? Now you could go and see like how this is like the exercise guidelines aren't exactly, I don't think, were designed to actually be followed, because it's not practical in the modern world. And then the last point is place symbols where you can see them. This is the most important exercise. So his particular this one here about creating the symbols and then projecting them throughout the universe. So there's a little bit more clarity here, Howdie. And then that being the most important of the exercises in this collection. Those to me, I think, are the key points when looking at this one.
So I think I'll just, because Howdie looks like he's thinking, and if you want to go, Howdie, let me know. If not, I think I was looking at
Go ahead.
on the cover of the book, right? And I just read about it. It's a Photoshop symbol of an idea Jon had. And it looks like there is 1, 2, 3 symbols, and then there's then they're all pressed together. So I guess that could be a 4th overall writing kind of symbol. I don't know. But so much of what he talks about when he's describing how one gets moved into the circle or into the painting, and then there has to do with symbolism, right? And that this is the basis of a lot of the realities that are created. And so I think maybe the exercise is to show you that you can do this too, right? Kind of thing. I don't know like why per se, but a lot of how he describes is how realities are created, how universes and circles are created are through symbolism. So I don't know, but yeah.
This one, yeah, this one I'm having trouble figuring out because it's now he's asking you to project symbols. But there's no guidelines as to what the symbols are, but then he wants you to have them
You're supposed
visible.
to create symbols. So that's the guideline. Like you make the symbol.
Right. Right. Yeah. But it's still,
I have a thought.
nothing on this one.
When I used to listen to Bob and Ion, remember Bob Neverett, Bob Dobbs, the Discordianism and the Church of the Subgenius stuff. And I remember listening to him with a caller one time. They were talking about symbolism, and he was saying about how like you have a symbol that's important to you, and like whenever it pops up or you see it, this is how you recognize that there's something meaningful happening. So a lot of people they have a lot of affinity towards a symbol that at least we think somebody else created, right? No, whenever I see this, whatever, something good is happening, or I should keep following this path or whatever. So maybe this is to get people to look for symbols that they created as opposed to ones that were brought into them from someone else, right? So if you have a thing that you design and then that pops up somewhere, are you in a reality of your own creation? It's a way of recognizing that. And whether that is that it happened because you just created that symbol now, or whether it came to your mind because the larger you that exists outside of all those layers, like created it for like at the point when you were drawing it here inside this simulation or the matrix or whatever, you're remembering that this is like a symbol of your structure. And this is how you start to identify the way you laid things out. Right. So I think it can go both ways. It's one of these like, it's like a two-way street, right? Like, am I creating it now from this space, or am I just remembering something that I created before? And this is how I find my spots in the game.
All right. So I've got 15 more minutes, and then I have to give Mr. Rich a ride somewhere.
Why don't you just tell us about one last exercise, and then we can wrap it?
That's what I'm getting at. We're going to have one last one. And let me see. I am going to do, so these are 2. And I think they could be, but they're very similar. The first one is project gold, silver, ruby, and diamond energy. So like a moment, or like each one of those concepts, whatever you want to think gold, silver, ruby, and diamond energy would be like, so that would be one. And then another exercise is to do the same thing, but to project earth, wind, fire, and water energy. So thoughts on those?
My first thought is like, why is he chosen ruby? That's one you would almost never put in this group usually, right? You could see the gold, the silver, the diamond. I might have thought mercury
Emerald.
even, or emerald, or ruby.
Right.
Dorothy did have.
That's exactly what I thought.
Dorothy had ruby
Exactly
slippers.
what I thought.
Yeah.
Ruby has a rich hypnotic concept in
Jack Ruby.
Yeah, Jack Ruby, ruby slippers. We're on to you, Rappaport.
Yeah. So one of the things that I was made aware of at a certain point, and then was able to find the correlation in my own life, is certain people in certain projects or who are in a certain track, they are given certain gifts at certain times in their life. These gifts are often jewelry, and people are like, oh, I'm getting such like a wonderful gift, like, oh, this is the most nicest piece of jewelry I've ever had. But what it really is like some acknowledgement that you have moved into a different layer of your programming or whatever tasks you're doing, or it's kind of like a reward or a symbol that you did the task or you did the thing of that level. And so I can think of certain gifts that were kind of puzzling to me how and when they came to me. But when I understood this from certain researchers I was like, oh, that makes sense on a certain level. And then obviously the others are elementals. Right. And I had a really interesting conversation with a couple of people after she brought it up to me, but then with a girl named Project Cheney, when we had gotten into this discussion about the elementals as it related to like the surfaces in tennis. Right. And that we know this is part of like the Chinese, like there's like the wood rabbit, and there's like an element that goes with different things, but it can go really far into explaining like a person's nature and the things that they resonate with and whatnot. And this idea that you can practice it and become one with or skilled with using elementals that aren't necessarily the one you're originally drawn to, right? It's kind of like a person who, for me with the tennis, who was naturally good on grass, but then they developed their play game. So kind of being able to operate in the different levels of elemental reality, whether this comes as metals or gems or, the earth, wind, fire, the more natural grounded elements or whatnot. Well, that was weird. I was like, when there's a little echo, that always highlights something. I think it's learning to resonate with those things.
All right.
Obviously, it's the four, and the four, of course, in native tradition is the realm, is the material realm, is the number of four, right? The four elements, the four directions, the four levels of teaching. So, and what did he want you to do again with them, Michael? He said project them.
Just project them.
Just project.
Just project Ruby. Just project Earth. Whichever of the topic of the list. Yeah, each one of those words, like whatever, however you're going to embody that concept in order to project it.
I guess actually this one again. Some of these I think you couldn't really make a comment until you've tried it.
That's a fair point. Fair observation.
Yeah, because again, this one is like there's something more to it than it sounds like just in the description. There's something like you do it, and then it's going to be like, oh, wait a minute. This is kind of like this is what you're doing almost.
Right, and this is what that feels like, and it brings a resolution. I think to me, I always took these as resolution building exercises as well.
In the book, and I haven't read the whole thing, but in the part that I have read, he does talk about particular colors when he's learning about energy healing and right, imagining certain colors when he does certain things and whatnot. So that could relate in some way to the gold, silver, ruby sort of diamond aspect of it. I haven't come across anything where he's talking about earth, wind, fire, whatever. But yeah, I agree. We'd have to do it to see what sort of, does a certain thing always happen? A certain set of thoughts or a certain feeling when you think of the certain one or whatnot. I think it has to be experiential.
All right.
All right.
So how do we want to go and wrap this up?
You give your final statement, Michael, then Howdie, and then I'll bring us home.
So, all right. So I thought this was a really interesting conversation that we had, but particularly in context of all of our previous conversations. Like that's the way how I like to frame up what the three of us are doing over this real trilateral commission, you know, the show which we're doing, this framework which we're creating. So what I would like to do is I'm going to spend a little bit of time once this is over and inventory. I'm going to go back and look at all the shows which we did together, and I'm going to see if I identify, at least for me, a sort of order within that madness. So that's what I'm going to take with this, and then maybe tie it into some of these exercises. So hopefully we do this again, and it's not another 9-month process, but that's what I want to bring to the next one.
Howdie.
Yeah, I kind of liked when we made the format change to try to say, let's do something different with these new ones, which was bringing something that we felt was something that we've done, something we've experienced, something that we've dealt with in our own personal way, and share that together with the others, and in a sense, share that with the community. So we move from sort of just an intellectual idea, an intellectual discussion, to something that becomes a little more practical and hands-on, that because now a lot of people can try these exercises themselves and find out, well, what does it do for you? We might find out in the comments like, holy crap, well, I never thought about that. You know, so I think this is a really interesting way of going forward now, especially with where we are in the world of now. Let's bring in more experience, more of what have you done, and how has that affected your experience, and what do the others have to say about it? So I like this format.
I enjoy it as well. And, you know, I kind of, you know, Howdie, I really appreciated your just honesty and bluntness about where you were at with things. And I think it makes it even more interesting for these conversations that we each see it a little differently. We're maybe each, at least at this moment, thinking our aim is somewhere different. Like for me, it's changed over time. There's been times when I thought I was done. There's been times I'm doubling down on I love this reality. There's been everything in between. And to each be in a different spot and be able to come together and talk about how we see it at this point, what's informing that you know, perspective, what the, you know, both next logical or maybe the illogical and therefore probably more useful thing to do, right? In that situation is, I think is way more exciting than us all just being in agreement about, about everything. So I enjoyed and appreciated that. And yeah, I thought those exercises were cool. And I'm really glad I'm going to finish reading this book. But it's very interesting the way that it really correlates with stories that he tells in here. And the exercises, I don't know if he did the exercise. I think he maybe made the exercises after he wrote the book from the things he learned while doing this. And it's not really available anymore, the book. It's probably his least known, but probably most important book, because it isn't just describing the problem. It's kind of explaining how it all works, right? So anywho, so cool. Always enjoy it. Different every time.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So Michael, is your, what date does your book come out, or is it out?
It's out. It's
Okay.
out as right now as a PDF file, and within a couple of weeks, it should be ready as a print book, and then sometime in November as an audiobook.
Okay, and it's available on your website, or where can people find it?
Yeah, they can go to my website or track me back through the YouTube channel. But yeah, it's on the website for now, and then obviously once it's a print book, it'll be bookstores.
All right, Michael.
An ideal Christmas gift for all of our families. So people, we start thinking right now.
Again, be careful. Remember, I'm living on the edge of the Gnostic world now.
That's
I'm
right.
like, I'm on the fringe.
That's what you want to give. That's the work you want to give to your family and friends.
He might be on the fringe,
I think we all are. This is-
All right. So, Michael, anything different
Nothing new
going on for
me.
you?
I'm just happy to be here with everyone today.
You can always find Michael and I together doing some format or another every week. So you know where to find us. We will see you next time. Again, as Michael said, hopefully it won't be so long, Howdy. And probably in the new year, but hopefully not 9 months. And that's it. Everybody have a wonderful day. Take care.
Cheers.